Hello friends, in this video I am going to share lecture on the Napoleonic era. This is mainly focused on GS paper 1 for UPSC mains. Let's begin our topic. Previously two lectures on Industrial Revolution and French Revolution followed by this Napoleonic era. So after French Revolution, the revolution is uh, end by the starting of the Napoleonic era. Let's begin the topic on Napoleonic era. Here we have to discuss about how the regime of the Napoleon in France. So Napoleon ruled for 15 years, closing out the quarter century so dominated by the French Revolution. So his own ambitions were to establish a solid dynasty within France and to create a French dominated empire in Europe. To this end, he moved steadily to consolidate his personal power and proclaiming himself emperor and sketching a new aristocracy. He was almost constantly at war with Britain, his most dogged opponent, but Prussia and Austria also joining successive coalition. It means France is combined with Prussia and Australia. Until 1812, his campaigns were usually successful, although he frequently made errors in strategy, especially in the concentration of troops and the deployment of artillery. He was a master tactician, repeatedly snatching victory from initial defeat in the major battles. So, next slide is want to say about Napoleonic France directly annexed territories in the Low Countries and Western Germany, applying revolutionary legislation in full. Full satellite kingdoms were set up in other parts of the Germany and Italy, in Spain and in Poland. So only after 1810 did Napoleon clearly overreach himself. His empire stirred enmity widely and in conquered Spain an important guerrilla movement harassed his forces, and Russia briefly allied turned hostile, and an 1812 invasion attempt failed miserably in the cold Russian winter. A new alliance formed among the other great powers in 1813. France fell to the invading forces of this coalition in 1814 and Napoleon was exiled. He returned dramatically only to be defeated at Waterloo in 1815. His regime had finally ended. Let's see the map. Here is France and King of Spain. So Spain is occupied by the France sometime, and Napoleon's regime produced three major accomplishments aside from its many military episodes. The first is focused on it confirmed many revolutionary changes within France itself. It means Napoleon was a dictator, maintained only a sham parliament and rigorously policing press and assembly, though some key liberal principles were in fact ignored. Equality under the law was for the most part enhanced through Napoleon's sweeping new law codes, and hereditary privileges among adult males become a thing of the past. A strongly centralized government recruited bureaucrats according to their abilities. New educational institutions under state control provided access to the bureaucratic and specialized technical training. The religious freedom survived despite some conciliations of Roman Catholic opinion freedom of internal trade and encouragements to the technical innovation allied the state with commercial growth. Sales of church land were confirmed and the rural France emerged as a nation of strongly independent peasant proprietors. Next, move on to next slide. The Napoleon's conquest cemented the spread of French revolutionary legislations to much of Western Europe. The powers of the Roman Catholic Church and guilds and moral aristocracy came under the gun. The old regime was dead in Belgium, Western Germany and Northern Italy. Let's move on to next slide. Finally, the wider conquest permanently altered the European map and Napoleon's kingdoms consolidated scattered territories in Germany and Italy, and the welter of divided states was never restored. These developments, but also resentment at Napoleonic rule, sparked growing nationalism in these regions and also in Spain and Poland. The Prussia and Russia, less touched by new ideologies, nevertheless introduced important political reforms as a means of strengthening the states to resist the Napoleonic war machine. Prussia expanded its school system and modified serfdom. It also began to recruit larger armies. Britain was less affected, protected by its powerful navy and an expanding industrial economy that ultimately helped wear Napoleon down. But even in Britain, French revolutionary examples sprouted a new wave of democratic agitation. So finally, French Revolution leads to the wave of democratic agitation. School system and modified serfdom, it also began to recruit larger armies, and Britain was less affected, protected by its powerful navy and an expanding industrial company of economy that ultimately helped wear Napoleon down. But even in Britain, French revolutionary examples sprouted a new wave of democratic agitation in 1814 to 15. The victories powers convened at the Congress of Vienna to try to put Europe back together, though there was no thought of literally restoring the world that had existed before 1789. The regional Germany and Italian states were confirmed as a buffer to any future French expansion. The Prussia gained new territories in western Germany. Russia took over most of the Poland. Previously, it is divided in the late 18th century until Napoleonic brief incursion. Britain acquired some former French, Spanish, and Dutch colonies, including South Africa. The Bourbon dynasty was restored to the French throne in the person of Louis XVIII, but revolutionary laws were not repealed, and a parliament, though based on very narrow suffrage, proclaimed a constitutional monarchy. The Treaty of Vienna disappointed nationalists who had hoped for a new Germany and Italy, and it certainly daunted democrats and liberals. However, it was not reactionary, nor was it punitive, or as far as France was concerned. Overall, the treaty strove to re-establishment a balance of power in Europe and to emphasize a conservative political order tempered by concessions to new realities. The former was remarkably successful, preserving the present of peace for more than half a century, the later effort less so. So, move on to another important reaction from the conservative point of view. The conservatisms did dominate the European political agenda through the mid 1820s. Major governments, even in Britain, used police agents to ferret out agitators. The prestige of the Roman Catholic Church soared in France and elsewhere. The Europe's conservative leader was Prince von Metternich and chief minister of the Habsburg monarchy. Metternich realized the fragility of the Habsburg rule, were not only wedded to church and monarchy but also as a bodyguard, and the combination of German, Hungarian and Slavic peoples vulnerable to any nationalist sentiment. He sedulously avoided the significant change in his own lands and encouraged the international status quo as well. He sponsored congresses at several points through the early 1820s to discuss intervention against political unrest. He was particularly eager to promote conservatism in the German states and in Italy, where Austrian administration of northern provinces gave his regime a new stack. Let's move on to next slide. This is nevertheless in 1820s the revolutionary agitation broke out in fringe areas. Risings in several Italian states were put down. A rebellion in Spain was also suppressed, though only after several years, foreshadowing more than a century of recurrent political instability. The revolutions also confirmed Spain's loss of most of its American colonies, which had first risen during the Napoleonic occupation. A Greek revolution against Ottoman control fared better, for Greek nationalists appealed to European sympathy for a Christian nation struggling against Muslim dominance. With France, British, Russian backing, Greece finally won its independence in 1829 onwards. The liberal agitation began to revive in Britain, France, and the Low Countries by the mid 1820s. The liberals wanted stronger parliaments and a wider protection of individual rights. They also sought a vote for the proprietary classes. They wanted commercial legislation, that would favor business growth, which in Britain meant attacking the corn law of tariffs that protected landlord interest and kept food prices, that is the wages and so on, artificially high. Belgian liberals also had a nationalist grievance, for the Treaty of Vienna had placed their country under Dutch rule. Next, the liberal conscience fueled a new round of revolution in 1830s, sparked by a new uprising in Paris. The French monarchy had tightened regulation of the press and of university professors, producing classic liberal issues. Artisans and eager for more political rights also rose widely against economic hardship and the principles of the new commercial economy. This combination chased the Bourbon king, producing a new and slightly more liberal monarchy, an expanded middle class voting system, and some transient protections for freedom of the press. The new regime also cut back the influence of the church. The revolution spread to some German and Italian states and also to Belgium, where also several years an independent nation with a liberal monarchy was proclaimed. The Britain was spread outright, outright evolution and but massive agitation forced a reform bill in 1832 that effectively enfranchised all middle class males and set the framework for additional liberal legislation, including repeal of the Corn Laws and municipal government reform during the next decade. And all middle class males set the framework. Europe was now divided between a liberal west and conservative center and the east. Russia indeed seemed largely exempt from the political currents and swirling in the rest of the continent. The party, because of the absence of the significant social and economic change, a revolt by some liberal-minded army officers in 1825. The 1825 was put down with ease and a new Tesser and Nicholas I installed a more rigorous systems of political police and censorship. The nationalist revolt in Poland, a part of the 1830 movement, was suppressed with great force. Russian diplomatic interest continued to follow largely traditional lines with recurrent warfare with the Ottoman Empire in an effort to gain territory to the south. Only after 1850 did the Russian regime seriously rethink its adamantly conservative stance. Here, this pattern could not prevail elsewhere in Europe. Scandinavian governments moved towards increasing liberalisms by expanding the power of the parliaments, a development that was completed in the late 1840s. The Dutch monarchy did the same. Elsewhere, the next major step resulted once again from a series of revolutions in 1848, which proved to be Western Europe's final revolutionary round. So, next, move on to the revolution of 1848. The final revolutionary round, it's also called as the revolution of 1848. After adopting the reforms in the 1830s, the early 1840s, the Louis Philippe of France rejected further change and thereby spurred new liberal agitation. The artisan concerns also had quickened against their loss of status and shifts in work conditions. Following from the rapid economic change, a major recession in 1846 to 47 added to popular unrest. Some socialist ideas spread among artisans leaders. Also, the urged a regime in which the workers could control their own small firms and labor in harmony and equality. A major propaganda campaign for wider suffrage and political reform brought police action in France, February 1848, which in turn prompted a classic street rising that seized the monarchy never to return back and briefly established a republican regime based on universal manhood suffrage. Next, the revolt quickly spread to Austria, Prussia, Hungary, and Bohemia and various parts of Italy. These raisings included most of the ingredients present in France, but also serious peasant grievances against manorial obligations and a strong nationalist current that sought national unification in Italy and Germany and Hungary. The independents are Slavic autonomy in the Habsburg lands, and new regimes were set up in the many areas, while a national assembly convened in Frankfurt to discuss German unity. Here, the independents are the Slavic autonomy in the Habsburg lands. Here, the major rebellions were put down in 1849. The Austrian revolutionaries were divided over nationalist issues, with German liberals opposed to minority nationalisms. This helped the Habsburg regime maintain control of its army and move against rebels in Bohemia, Italy and Hungary. In the Persian revolutionaries divided between those who sought only political change and artisans who wanted job protections and other gains from the state. In a bloody clash in June 1848, the artisans were put down and the republican regimes moved steadily towards the right, ultimately electing a nephew of Napoleon I as president, and he in turn establishing the empire, claiming the title Napoleon III. And the Prussian monarch turned down a chance to hold a liberal united Germany and instead used his army to chase the revolutionary governments and aided by the divisions between the liberals and working class radicals. And there is a divisions between the liberals and the working class radicals, and revolt quickly spread to Russia, Austria, Prussia, and Hungary, Bohemia. And finally, what's happening? Yeah, Persian, Parisian revolutionaries divided between those who sought only political change and artisans who wanted to job protection. So the Prussian monarchy turned down a chance to have had a liberal united Germany and instead of used his army to chase the revolutionary governments, and allied by divisions between the liberals and the working class radicals. Despite the defeat of the revolutions, however, the important changes resulted from the 1848 rising, and monarchism was permanently abolished throughout Germany, and Habsburg lands, giving peasants new rights, and democracy ruled in France and even under the new empire. And despite considerable manipulation, universal manhood suffrage had been permanently installed, and Prussia, again in conservative hands, and nevertheless established a parliament based on the limited vote as a gesture to liberal opinion. The Habsburg monarchy installed a rationalized bureaucratic structure to replace the localized landlord rule. Again, so a new generation of the conservatives came to the fore. For Metternich had been exiled by revolution, so who were eager to compromise with and utilize new political forces rather than oppose them down the line. Finally, some new political currents had been sketched. The socialisms, though wondered by the failure of the revolutions, was an Europe's political agenda, and some feminist agitation had surfaced in France and Germany. The stage was set for rapid political evolution after 1850s, in a process that made literal revolution increasingly difficult. The years between 1815 and 1850s had not seen major diplomatic activity in the part of the most of European powers. The Russia accepted. So the Russian Revolution is also followed by that, and exactions after the Napoleonic Wars combined with the desire to use diplomacy as a weapon of internal politics. The Britain continued to expand its colonial hold, most notably introducing more direct control over its empire in India. So the France and Britain, though still way off each other and joined in resisting Russian gains in the Middle East. The France also began to acquire new colonial holdings, notably by invading Algeria in 1829. Seeds were being planted for more rapid colonial expansion after mid-century, but the period remained on the surface rather fit in marked contrast to the ferment of revolution and reaction during the same decades. Here, till now, we are completing the Napoleon era. So, due to the Napoleonic era, the starting of Russian Revolution is we have to discuss in the later lecture. This is how the lecture 3 is completed. Here we should know about how the Napoleonic era introduced the more liberal society compared to the conservatisms, okay, and how the Italy and Germany to be unified, the starting stages begins from the Napoleonic era. We should know about it also. So if you like the video and like it, share it and comment it and subscribe the channel. Thanks for watching. Thank you.